There comes a moment when silence speaks louder than sound, when the unraveling begins not with a scream, but with the quiet loss of love, the slow erosion of self-respect. This is not just poetry. This is a mirror, a map, a wake-up call wrapped. In reverence, we die not only in body, but in spirit, in connection, in forgetting. But oh, we can live again. If you're ready to journey through the ache, through the remembering, through the rising, then come. This is how we finally die. And how, by grace, we begin to live again. The unraveling begins when love departs. When did the unraveling begin? Not all at once, not like the thunderclap or the flood, but like a thread loose, unnoticed, quietly pulled from the edges while we busied ourselves with surviving. We didn't even hear the first snap. Didn't feel the shift in the room when love took a quiet step backward. We were too caught in the chase and deadlines and demands, in performances and pretense to notice that the sacred had slipped out the back door. We didn't see it, but we felt it. Oh, how we felt it. The chill in the air where warmth once bloomed, the silence between sentences that once sang, the space in our homes that grew even when we stood inches apart. This is how it begins. This is how the soul starts to die, not with violence, but with vacancy. When love departs, it takes the light with it, and the heart, once so full it spilled over into words and touches and glances, begins to contract, begins to forget how to expand. Because the absence of love is not neutral, it is weight, it is erosion. It is the wind that hollows out our sacred center. We call it growing apart, we call it busyness, we call it life happens. But what really happened was the choice not to choose each other again and again. Because love isn't a one-time vow. It's a daily resurrection, a ritual of remembrance. A decision to see, to stay, to soften. We stopped showing. Up to the altar of each other, the offerings ceased. No more listening with our eyes. No more reaching without reason. No more sacred pauses between the noise. We grew tired. Tired people forget to tend, forget to water, forget to whisper. I still see you, and that is where the dying begins. There was a time we knew how to love, when affection was not conditional, when respect was not reserved for those who earned it by performance. We made room for imperfection because we knew that to be human is to be holy and flawed all at once. But the world taught us otherwise. It trained us to armor up, to protect before we extend, to analyze before we empathize. And so we forgot that love is not a transaction. It is a presence, showing up even when the script is messy, even when the lines aren't clear. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that love meant always agreeing, always pleasing, always smiling. But real love, true, raw, resurrecting. Love holds space for contradiction. It doesn't run from pain. It doesn't silence truth. It doesn't flinch when the other trembles. Instead, it says, I see you not just the polished you, but the breaking you, the questioning you, the becoming you, and I do not turn away. But we forgot, and in our forgetting we fractured. Heart cannot live long without expression, and the spirit cannot breathe in a house where love has gone silent. So we began to speak with edge, to touch without tenderness, to show up in body, but not in soul. We began to call duty love. We began to call silence peace. We began to call disconnection maturity. But truthfully, we were just tired of trying. Tired of being the one who always initiated, always bent, always bridged the gap. So we stopped the unraveling. Continued. I have walked in rooms where two people once loved with a fire so fierce it could light the stars, but now sit across from each other as if the other were furniture. Not enemies, not fighters, just ghosts. Haunting the same house, breathing the same air, but no longer meeting in the middle. It's a quiet grief, the death of love. Not always loud, not always dramatic, but final in its own soft way. And sometimes what dies isn't the person, it's the possibility. The version of us that could have lived if we had kept choosing, kept honoring, kept listening. Because love dies, not in the arguments, but in the absences. In the days we stop reaching, in the words we withhold, in the assumptions we let harden into walls. And walls do not build homes. They build prisons. Dr. Maya Angelou said, if we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die. And she wasn't speaking only of romance. She was speaking of us. All of us. Humans made for communion, now starving in the same rooms. We are dying not from hunger of food, but hunger of spirit. Hunger for someone to look us in the eyes and say, I see your soul, and I will not abandon it. But the world taught us the opposite. It taught us that to protect yourself, you must distrust. To lead, you must dominate. To be wise, you must detach. So we learned how to succeed, but we forgot how to sit, how to soften, how to simply be with another. And so love faded, not because we weren't capable, because we weren't courageous. We were afraid. Afraid of being seen, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being hurt. Again, so we chose comfort over connection, control over closeness, distance over devotion. And this, my dear, is how we begin to die. But the truth is, we were made. To love, we were made not just to survive each other, but to reflect the divine through one another. There is a mirror in every soul. And when we truly love, we polish that mirror until it reflects heaven. To love is to say, I will not forsake you in your unloveliness. I will not run when the script falls apart, will not reduce you to your worst day. To love is to say, you are safe with me, not perfect, not always pleasant, but safe and sacred and seen. When that is lost, when love becomes a scorecard, a performance, a distant memory, we die. Bit by bit, we walk the earth breathing, but not alive, smiling but not open, succeeding but not fulfilled. Because without love, the soul forgets how to stretch, how to sing, how to soar. So let us ask ourselves, not in shame, but in sacred honesty, when did I stop choosing love? Not the feeling, but the posture, the practice, the pursuit. When did I last look into someone's eyes and say with my whole being, you matter, you are enough, you don't have to earn my tenderness? When did I stop calling my loved ones? Just to listen? When did I last forgive without being asked? When did I last embrace someone as though it was the last time? We cannot reclaim what we do not recognize we've lost, so start there. Start with the naming. Start with the tears. Start with the ache in your chest that says, this is not how love was meant to live. Because love was made to be embodied, to be spoken, to be shown. Love is not abstract. It's not a theory. It's 1,000 tiny choices that say, I will not let you walk through this world unseen. And maybe it's not too late. Maybe the unraveling can reverse. Maybe if we trace the thread back to the beginning, we can remember the rhythm. Maybe we can relearn how to speak gently, how to listen deeply, how to honor wildly. Maybe we can begin again, not with fireworks, but with forgiveness, not with grand gestures, but with sacred small ones. A hand held, a phone call made, a silence honored, a heart heard, because the moment love re-enters, something in us resurrects. The lights flicker back on. The air feels fuller. The world becomes not easier, but softer. This, beloved, is how we begin to live again. Where there is no self-respect, there is no home. You can live in a mansion and still be homeless if you do not carry peace. Within, you can wear diamonds on your wrist, but drag brokenness behind your eyes. If your soul does not know its own name, because home is not for walls. Home is not square footage. Home is not the softness of your bed or the paint on your walls. Home is the posture of your being, is how you hold yourself in the dark. It is how you speak to yourself when no one is listening. It is the temple you become when you remember you are sacred and beloved. Too many of us are wandering in our own skin, exiled from ourselves. We left home the day we stopped honoring our worth, Self-respect is the floor beneath your feet. It is the ground that holds you when the world tries to shake you. It is not pride. It is not ego. It is not performance. It is knowing deep, still, and unwavering that you are not a mistake. You are not too much. You're not too little. You're not a problem to be fixed. You are a soul to be witnessed. You are a voice that deserves to speak. You are a light that no one gave you and no one can take. But we forgot. Oh, how we forgot. We learned to dim, to bend, to mold ourselves into what made others comfortable. We called it kindness. We called it being easy to love. We called it humility. But it was abandonment. Abandonment of the self for the illusion of acceptance. And every time you abandon yourself, you teach your soul that it cannot trust you. There is no home where there is no self-respect. Because without it, your mind becomes a battlefield. Your body becomes an apology. Your heart becomes a house with all the lights turned off. And how can anyone come home to you if you yourself have fled? You see, love begins inside. Worth begins inside. It is the inner altar. You return to again and again, not when you feel powerful, but when you feel broken. It's the voice that says, you are still worthy, even now, especially now. But so many of us were never taught that voice. We were taught obedience. We're taught compliance. We were taught that value comes only if we earn it. So we became performers. We wore masks. We chased applause. We clung to relationships that mirrored our own inner neglect. Because when you don't respect yourself, you attract people who don't either. And that, my dear, is how the generational cycle spins. How many of us were told to love others before we ever learned to love ourselves? How many of us gave from a cup that was never filled? How many of us called it noble to shrink, to silence ourselves, to pour out every drop until we were brittle and empty? That is not sacrifice. That is self-erosion. And God never asked us to become invisible in the name of love. You cannot be a home to anyone if you have evicted yourself. You cannot hold space for another. If you refuse to take up space yourself, self-respect is the door you lock, not to shut others out, but to protect the holy within. Dr. Maya Angelou said, "If we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die." But I tell you, the death begins in secret. It begins in the silent way you tear yourself down. In the mirror, in the way you apologize for existing, it's in the way you settle for crumbs and call it connection. It begins in how you speak to yourself at midnight. In the way you say yes when your soul is screaming no. In the way you keep tolerating what you were never meant to endure. And over time, the body remembers. The heart becomes numb. The eyes forget how to shine. This is not the life we were made for. Self-respect is not something you earn. It's something you reclaim. It's remembering that your breath is enough, that your softness is strength, that you do not have to perform. Wholeness in order to be worthy of love. It's waking up and saying, I am not behind. I am not broken. I am becoming. Standing in your own story without shame, without defense, without editing your truth to fit into someone else's expectations, because the soul will rebel against any life that betrays its essence. And some of us are sick, not because of disease, but because of disconnection. Disconnection from ourselves, from our truth, from the sacred rhythm we were born with. But the good news, you can come home. You can return. You return by speaking to yourself like someone you love, by honoring your needs without guilt, by choosing rest before you crash, by ending conversations that dishonor your peace. You return by remembering your body is not a battleground. It is a sanctuary. You return by no longer betraying your gut just to keep others comfortable, because your intuition is ancient. It is not paranoia. It is not drama. It is the language of your soul saying, protect what is holy. Guard what is sacred. You are not a doormat. You are a temple. And temples do not beg to be entered. They invite. They welcome. They stand firm, open, radiant, not for everyone, but for the ones who know how to remove their shoes, how to tread softly, how to honor what is holy ground. So stop explaining your worth to those who cannot see. Stop arguing with those who benefit from your silence. Stop begging to be treated like something you were born as. You are the image of God. Not some days. Not when you're perfect. Not when you're pleasing always. And if the world forgets, let your own voice remind you. Because here's the truth. The way you treat yourself sets the standard. For how others will treat you, if you constantly interrupt your own needs, others will too. If you silence your own voice, others will do the same. If you dishonor your own boundaries, others will trample them gladly. So the healing must begin inside. Not in changing the world's behavior, but in changing your own beliefs. The world reflects what we believe we deserve. So change the belief, change the reflection. Say it out loud. I am not too much. I am not a burden. I am not disposable. I am not what they did to me. I am worthy of love that does not cost my dignity. Don't need everyone to agree. You don't need everyone to understand. You just need to trust yourself again, to look in the mirror and no longer flinch, to say I love you without conditions, to walk into a room without shrinking, to own your story without apology, to know that who you are without fixing, without proving, without pretending is still holy. And when you begin to live from that place, everything changes. You no longer chase. You no longer beg. You no longer settle for pain and call it passion. You become a home again, sanctuary, a light that shines from within, and those who cannot handle the brightness, let them adjust or let them leave. But you no longer dim. So, let this be the moment you return to yourself. Let this be the hour you reclaim your name. Let this be the day you stop waiting for permission to live. Because the world doesn't need more people who fit in. It needs more people who are rooted in their sacredness. You are not too late. You're not too broken. You are not too far gone. You are right on time for your own return. So come home, beloved. Come back to the altar of your own soul, where truth lives, where joy returns.
Wow.
Where dignity is never up for debate. Because where there is no self-respect, there is no home, but where it returns, everything begins to live again. What happens when we stop seeing each other? What happens when we stop seeing each other? Not with the eyes, but with the heart. With the reverence that says, you are not invisible to me. What happens when we stop recognizing the sacred in a stranger's face, the holy in a loved one's weariness, the divine in the wrinkles, the silence, the mess? We don't stop seeing all at once. No, we fade, slowly. We drift into detachment, into hurried hellos, to distracted glances and conversations that only skim the surface. It begins when we trade presence for performance. We stop asking real questions. When we stop waiting for real answers, and somewhere in the blur, the human across from us becomes background. The spouse becomes scenery. The friend becomes function. Stranger becomes silhouette. And the soul begins to ache. Because to be human is to be seen, to be known. Not for what you produce, but for who you are beneath the armor. Have you ever sat in a room full of people and felt utterly alone? Not because no one was near, but because no one was present? Have you ever told the truth and watched it fall into a silence too sharp to be safety? Have you ever reached out and found no hand waiting back? This is not a new grief. It is ancient. Is the ache of eyes that scan the room, hoping to be remembered, recognized, received. It is the grief of existence without witness, and I believe this is how we begin to die, Dr. Maya Angelou said. If we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die. And I hear a silent echo in her words. If we stop seeing each other, because love cannot live where we are unseen, and respect cannot root in shallow soil, we must be known to be nourished. And yet how often do we turn our heads from what is uncomfortable? How often do we label, categorize, reduce? How often do we decide who someone is without ever hearing how they came to be? We see the addict, but not the ache. We see the anger, but not the origin. We see the mask, but not the man beneath it, pleading for permission to take it off. We see bodies, not stories. And the moment we stop seeing deeply, we begin to love. Conditionally, we begin to honor selectively. We begin to retreat into fear and control and critique, and the soul of community collapses. What happens when we stop seeing each other?
How?
The teacher grows tired because no one sees her exhaustion. Child grows hard because no one sees his loneliness. The elder stops speaking because no one is listening, and love cannot survive in a house where no one is home to each other. So we walk past one another with headphones in. We text more than we talk. We reply more than we respond. We speak more than we listen. We wonder why the world feels colder. We have forgotten the eyes are an altar. That truly looking, is an act of communion. We have forgotten that to pause and truly witness someone's truth without fixing, without fleeing, without filtering, is an act of radical love. The soul wants to be seen, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy. But the world taught us to only show the polished, the filtered, the digestible. So now, we hide our grief behind small talk, tuck our trauma into to-do lists, bury our brilliance beneath someone else's blueprint, and we walk beside each other, but never into each other's truths. That's not living. That's just performing proximity. And we were not made to perform. We were made to be. Somewhere along the way, we forgot how to sit with the raw, with the real. With the revelation of another person's soul stretching in our direction, we flinch at vulnerability. We rush toward distraction. We get uncomfortable with emotion because it forces us to face our own. And so we stop seeing not just others, but ourselves. We stop recognizing our own ache in someone else's eyes. We stop seeing our shared humanity in the quiet tremble of a stranger. And without that mirror, we forget who we are, because you cannot remember your wholeness if you're only looking at yourself. It is in the eyes of another that we find confirmation. I am not alone. I am not forgotten. I am not beyond being understood. Seeing each other is not about fixing. It's about holding. It's about saying, I may not understand everything about your journey, but I will not leave the room when it gets heavy. It's about staying, even in silence, even in confusion, even in discomfort. It's about not needing to make it pretty before we make it real, because love that cannot sit with pain is not love. It's convenience. And we were never called to convenience. We were called to compassion. So what happens when we do begin to see again? What happens when we slow down long enough to look into the eyes of the one who serves our coffee and say, how are you today? What happens when we ask questions not to reply but to understand? What happens when we sit across from a friend and say, you don't have to be strong with me. You can fall apart here and know you're still held. What happens when we go into rooms not looking for who's looking at us but who's being ignored? We change the temperature of the world. We bring warmth to the cold places. We open windows in suffocating rooms. We remind people they are not just tools or titles or tasks. They are seen. They're sacred. They're still human. Can you imagine? How many hearts would begin to heal if they were simply acknowledged, not analyzed, not assessed, not advised, just seen, seen in their grief, seen in their celebration, seen in their questions, seen in their quiet becoming. We cannot fix what we refuse to face. We cannot love what we refuse to see. So the invitation today is, let's begin seeing again. Start with yourself. Look in the mirror until you find the softness again. Until the eyes, looking back, feel like home again. Till you stop critiquing and start honoring. Then take that same gaze and offer it to the world. Offer it to the friend who's always laughing but never says how they're really doing. Offer it to the family member you've misunderstood. Offer it to the person who hurt you and you no longer wish to carry bitterness toward. Offer it to the stranger on the street, on the train, in the elevator. Offer it like oxygen. Offer it like grace. Because someone out there, suffocating in invisibility, and you're seeing maybe the first breath they've taken all day. Dr. Angelou knew. She always knew. She saw people when they had forgotten themselves. She wrote of dignity. Not because it was popular, but because it was necessary, she wrote. If we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die. And in those words I hear a plea. Don't forget each other. Don't forget that behind every face is a story. Behind every silence is a storm. Behind every outburst is a brokenness that longs for belonging. Don't forget that even the ones who seem unlovable were once children looking for someone to see them. Don't forget that this world heals not through noise, but through notice, through attention, through acknowledgement, through the holy act of beholding. So today, let us slow down. Let us lay down our assumptions. Let us set aside our labels. Let us remove the armor from our eyes and see again, not to judge, not to compare, not to fix, but to say, I see you. Not for what you do, but for who you are. Let that be enough. Let that be worship. Let that be the beginning of healing. Because when we start seeing each other again, we start living again. And maybe, just maybe this, is how we finally rise. Resurrection requires remembering you don't rise because the world finally gives you permission. You rise because something inside you remembers. You were never meant to stay buried. You rise not in defiance, but in return. Return to the self. You were before the world told you to shrink. Return to the truth that was whispered to your spirit long before anyone ever silenced it. Return to the rhythm of your soul's original name, because resurrection is not always fire and thunder. Sometimes it's a whisper, a breath, a slow unfolding of what was never truly gone, but to resurrect. You must first remember, memory is a sacred door, and every healing begins with returning to what you forgot. The truth that never stopped being. True, you forgot how worthy you are. You forgot how deeply you feel. You forgot that softness is a strength. You forgot your voice was a river meant to run free. And somewhere along the way, you believed the forgetting was final. But it never was. Beneath the rubble of performance, of trauma, surviving your essence still breathes. That still small thing, that glowing ember. That knowing that says I was made for more than numbness, not that knowing that remembering, is the beginning of resurrection. You don't need to be perfect to rise. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to wait for the pain to end. You just need to say yes. Yes to the return. Yes to the rebuilding. Yes to the rising. The tomb does not have the final word. It's not for Jesus. It's not for you. But hear this. You cannot heal what you refuse to remember. You cannot restore what you keep pretending didn't break. You cannot resurrect what you keep burying under busyness and pride and distraction. Remembering is hard. It stings. It opens doors you thought were locked forever. But in those doors is your becoming.
Ow.
In those rooms is your authority. In those shadows is your crown. There's a version of you that never stopped dancing. A version that spoke truth before they taught you to filter it. A version that loved without fear, stood without apology, believed without needing proof. That version of you is not lost, just hidden, covered in layers of trying to please, trying to perform, trying to survive. But deep in your soul, they are. Still singing, they are still waiting, still calling out. Come back to yourself. Because your resurrection is not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming someone true. It's about pulling the sacred pieces of yourself out of the dust and letting them breathe again. Do you remember when you were still soft? When you cried without shame? When you trusted easily? When you loved with your whole chest and didn't flinch? That wasn't weakness. That was clarity. That was purity of spirit. But the world mistook it for fragility, and you believed them, so you hardened. You learned to hold your tears, to quiet your joy, to only speak when you were certain it would be well received, and in protecting yourself, you also silenced yourself. But resurrection is not afraid of vulnerability. Resurrection is the courage to feel again, to open again, to risk again, to say, I will not let the pain of the past keep me from the promise of my presence. Remembering is not just personal, it's prophetic. Because when you remember who you are, you help the world remember too. You become a mirror for others to see their own light again. You become a fire others can warm their hands. Beside, you become proof that healing is not only possible, it's inevitable when we return to what is real. You become a bridge for those who are still afraid to walk across their pain. Your return is a map, and every step you take back to yourself is holy ground, doctor. Maya Angelou said, "If we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die." But what if we gain it back? What if we choose to remember the love that still lives under the armor, the dignity that still breathes beneath the dust? What if we begin to tell each other the truth again, not the polished version, not the sanitized story, but the soul truth, the messy, sacred, pulsing humanity that says, "I've been lost too. I've forgotten too. But here I am, coming home." What if we built a world not on judgment, but on remembrance? Remembering that we belong to each other, that grace was never earned, just given, that compassion is not optional, it's oxygen, that we don't rise alone, we rise together. So remember what it felt like to laugh with your whole body, to dream without limits, to walk into a room and not measure your worth by anyone else's gaze. Remember what it felt like to write or dance or speak without wondering who would approve. Remember the stillness before the world grew loud. Remember the voice that whispered to you at midnight, "You are called to more, not more pressure, not more perfection, more purpose, more peace, more presence." Remember the sacred within. You don't need a sign from the sky. You don't need the applause of the crowd. You don't need the past to apologize. You just need a moment of sacred honesty, a moment when you stop running, when you sit with your soul and say, "I miss you. I miss the way I used to believe in beauty. I miss the way I used to fight for my joy. I miss the me I was before the pain, and I'm ready to remember again." That moment is resurrection. That moment is revival. That moment is how the dead things begin to stir. And when you remember, don't keep it to yourself. Tell someone else what's waking in you. Look into the eyes of another soul and say, "Hey, you don't have to be buried anymore. You don't have to keep dying just to make others comfortable." Say, "I forgot who I was once too, but I found my way back. You can too." Because the world is tired of pretending, tired of surface love, tired of empty peace. The world is starving for people who have remembered, people who walk in rooms and bring the presence of resurrection with them, people who know how to bless others without needing a stage, people who have seen death emotional, spiritual, relational, and have lived to tell the story of their rising. That person is you. So now, in the quiet of this moment, let the remembering begin, not just in your mind, but in your body, in your breath, in your bones. Let it return. Let the rhythm of who you are sing again. Move again. Rise again. You don't need to know the whole way. You just need to take the first step. You don't need to see the final vision. You just need to open your eyes to the next moment. Let your resurrection be slow if it must be. It be silent if it needs to. But let it be real. Let it be rooted in love, in memory, in grace. Because resurrection is not only for the afterlife, it's for this life. It is for the mornings you thought you wouldn't survive. It is for the forgiveness you swore you couldn't offer. It is for the light you thought was gone forever. It is here, now, in you. And it all begins when you remember. Let the revival begin, and US Wave wept long enough. We've wandered far enough. We've waited quietly at gravesites where the dreams we buried never left a tombstone. But now, the wind has shifted. There is something stirring in the belly of the soul, a deep rumble, not of wrath, but of awakening. It is not a trumpet in the sky. It is not a fire from heaven. It is the hush before a sacred rise. It is the voice of God saying, "Live, live again." Let the revival begin in you, not a revival of noise, not one built on spectacle or spotlight, but a revival of tenderness, stillness, the kind that begins when someone decides to love again after betrayal, to trust again after the tearing, to return to their voice after seasons of silence, the kind that is not televised, but felt like the quiet healing of a fractured soul saying yes to life one breath at a time, because this is how it happens, not in crowds, but in choices, not in stadiums, but in the unseen rooms where someone says, "I will no longer abandon myself." Revival is not an event. It is a becoming. It is when hearts that have hardened begin to break open again. When eyes that had dimmed start to recognize the holy again. When hands that forgot how to hold reach out once more, not in desperation, but in devotion. It is when men learn to cry without shame, and women learn to rest without guilt, and children feel safe enough to speak their truth without fear of being silenced. It is when homes become places of healing and not just houses of survival. Revival is not somewhere we go. It is someone we become. Let the revival begin where the wound once was. Let it begin in the broken places. Let it begin in the places we thought were too dead to rise. Let it begin in the mother who forgives herself, the father who softens, in the friend who speaks up, in the child who dares to dream again. Let it begin in the mirror. Let it begin in the moment you say, I no longer need to earn what was always mine: dignity, belonging, love. Let it begin in your bedroom, on the floor, with tears streaming down your face, and your heart finally whispering, I'm ready to come home. You don't need a microphone to be part of the revival. You don't need a platform to preach. Your life is the sermon. Your breath is the altar. You're quiet. Consistent choosing of love when bitterness would be easier. That is the gospel in motion. Your decision to stay soft in a world that rewards sharpness, that is sacred defiance. Your choice to forgive yourself and begin again, that is resurrection. With no need for applause, let the revival begin in you. Let it begin in me. Let it begin in the places no one sees. But heaven watches over with holy fire. Dr. Maya Angelou said, if we lose love and self-respect for each other, this is how we finally die. But let me tell you this, if we find it again, if we recover love and reclaim self-respect, this is how we finally live. This is how we rebuild what was broken. This is how we return to what is eternal. This is how we rise not just as individuals, but as a people who remember how to see, how to care, how to bless. We don't have to wait for revival to fall from the sky. We are the revival when we remember who we are and live from that place. So start small. Start by honoring your no as holy. Start by speaking with gentleness to the parts of you that are still healing. Start by forgiving what didn't go as planned and holding space for what's still possible. Start by seeing the image of God in the one you've grown tired of. Start by loving without needing control. Start by breathing deep, slow, unapologetic breath and calling that enough. The revival will not always roar. Sometimes it will whisper. Sometimes it will sound like, I forgive you. I see you. I'm still here. I love me enough not to settle. Sometimes it will sound like silence, but a different kind. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of restoration. Let the revival begin in the way you rise in the morning with intention. In the way you walk slower because you are no longer racing for approval. In the way you pray not just for answers, but for alignment. Let it begin in the way you feed your body like it matters. In the way you treat your home like it's sacred. In the way you honor your relationships as altars, not assignments. Let it begin in the way you speak your truth softly, clearly, without shrinking. Let it begin in the way you show up with your whole self, not just the curated version, because you, beloved, are not waiting for revival. You are revival. Every time you choose softness over sarcasm, you are reviving something. Every time you say, this cycle stops with me, you are planting resurrection. Every time you listen to someone instead of judging them, you are making a way for healing. Every time you remember your name, when the world calls you out of it, you are building a new future in real time. This is sacred work. You are not small for doing it quietly. You are not weak for doing it trembling. You are holy for doing it at all. Revival begins with the decision to love again, to believe again, to rise again, not because the pain didn't happen, but because it no longer defines you. It begins when we stop waiting to feel ready and simply say yes. Yes to becoming, yes to releasing, yes to walking, even with the limp. It begins when we understand that love is not just an emotion, it is an action, a presence, a return. So return to love. Return to grace. Return to the truth that your softness is not weakness, it is wisdom. Return to each other. Return to the places we forgot. Return to the fire that once lit your spirit. Let the revival begin in how we hold our children, and how we restore our friendships, and how we speak to strangers as if we expect to meet God in them. Let it begin in our marriages, in our ministries, in our mornings. Let it begin not when everything is perfect, but when we finally stop waiting for perfection. Let it begin when we show up as we are, whole, wounded, worthy. Let it begin when we realize we were never meant to do this alone. We rise together. We revive each other. We become a living sanctuary brick by brick, choice by choice, word by word. This is not the end. It's the beginning. The end was when we forgot, but now we remember. And because we remember, we rebuild, we resurrect, we revive. So speak this over your life today. I am the beginning of a new rhythm. I am the place where the pain stops. Okay. I am the soil for sacred things to grow. I am the echo of love that won't die. And when people ask, where did it all start? You'll sit started in me. It started the day I said, let the revival begin in us, and meant it. So now that you've heard the cry, felt the unraveling, stood in the silence where love once lived, what will you do with this knowing? Will you walk back into your life as if you didn't hear the whisper of God calling you home? Or will you? Let this word become flesh in your choices. Will you rise not just in inspiration but in intention? Let the revival begin in you. Speak love where bitterness has grown. Stand up for your soul when it wants to shrink. Look someone in the eyes and really see them. Forgive yourself for all the ways you forgot who you are. And then help someone else remember to start the revolution in your own reflection. Start the healing with how you hold your own heart. Start the revival not by waiting but by becoming. Because you, beloved, are not here by accident. Word found you because your spirit was ready. Ready to return. Ready to rebuild. Ready to resurrect. So take this fire and carry it into your days. Let your life become the sanctuary. Let your presence preach the sermon. Let your love be loud. And if you felt this word stir something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Live it. Let the world feel the echo. Let the revival begin in us, and let it never end.